All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending First Friday again. We've got a great program planned for you. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Brian. I'm the president and CEO here at Williamson, Inc. And again, appreciate your attending today. I'd like to introduce our presenter today is Lauren Ward. She's the Vice President of Marketing for Visit Franklin, which is our Convention and Visitors Bureau that is charged with really bringing tourism here to Williamson County. And so they do an outstanding job. And today's topic, I think, is really timely just in terms of, just marketing and social media in a pandemic and a time like this, and just the importance of maintaining your presence with your audience that you're trying to meet. So I think you're in for a great treat today. I also want to give a shout out to Adam Chapman. We just did a ribbon cutting yesterday for Chapman's Power Washing. He's one of our newest chamber members who's participating today. And so any of you need any power washing of your buildings or your sidewalks or things at home, make sure you reach out to Adam. He's got a great story, and we want him to feel welcome here in the Williamson County business community. So welcome, Adam, to your first Friday. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lauren Ward and turn it over to her. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to type those in the chat or the Q&A. She'll be monitoring that as we go through. But we're excited to have Lauren today, who's actually technically on vacation. So we appreciate you coming off of your vacation to do this for us today. So Lauren, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure if we have any Williamson County parents in the group, I'm in the Williamson County parent group, so I'm just taking off vacation for a few days to get school settled. I have a kindergartner entering the Williamson County school system, so we're trying to get all of that organized right now. But I'm more than happy to be with you all this morning, and thank you so much to Williamson Inc. for having me. Today, I'm going to take some time to walk through just some pretty general marketing tips for small businesses, and I'm going to cover social media as well. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about messaging during this pandemic, which I'm sure many of you have plenty of experience now as we're about 5 months into this thing. So before I get started, I want to give you a little bit of information about who I am and my expertise and kind of the point of view that I'm coming from as it relates to marketing and social media. I currently work for Visit Franklin, as Brian mentioned. So we are the tourism bureau for Williamson County. Like he said, we're charged with branding and promoting Williamson County to the visitor. So our main goal is to have visitors come into town, spend their money to create as much economic impact as possible for our county, and then go home. We're very welcoming, but we want people to come spend all their money and then leave us and go back to their home. You can see the number of visitors that we've seen here over the past couple of years and the economic impact there on the side as well. We've had a goal to reach 2 million visitors by 2020 for the past couple of years. And so hopefully we'll be inching closer towards that goal this year, although the pandemic has definitely put a bit of a wrench in those plans, as I'm sure you've seen with your businesses as well this year. So a little bit of background from a marketing perspective. I started my career at McNeely, Piggott & Fox, which is a marketing and PR agency in downtown Nashville. And I've worked with small, medium, and larger businesses probably for about a decade. I worked in all different industries, so I've had a lot of experience working with two-person shops and businesses all the way up to national corporations and federal government as well. And then I've been with Visit Franklin for about 3 years now, and I can tell you that tourism is by far the most fun industry I've worked in. There's a lot of great industries out there, but none quite like tourism in my eyes, at least. So I'm going to start out today with just some general marketing tips. And I want to acknowledge the fact that marketing can often be a second thought for small business owners, and rightfully so. You have so many different parts that are moving. You're trying to keep the lights on, the logistics of just handling your employees and the general day-to-day of your business. Sometimes marketing can fall by the wayside. And I think that marketing tends to be overwhelming for a lot of small business owners. They just look at the long list of things that they should be doing or could be doing, that you have great ideas, but sometimes you don't know where to start. So I'm hoping that this presentation today can serve as a starting place for you. Or maybe if you're a more seasoned marketing professional and you've been doing this for quite a while, hopefully this presentation will help give you some ideas of how to go back to the start. There's just some basics that I think that we forget about in marketing. We can get further down the line and forget that we need to go back to the basics. We need to go back to the research, the branding, and make sure that we have that right before we build on that with all of our additional marketing tools. So the first several slides, I'm going to walk you through just some general tips, and then we'll hop into social media and the pandemic. So first things first, you want to identify your goal. That seems very basic, but a lot of people, get wrapped up in opening their business, and they tend to lose sight of their main goal. So I'm not talking necessarily about your bottom line business goal. Obviously, if you want to reach a certain number of clients in a year, or you want to, hit a certain number of sales in that year, that is your ultimate goal. But I'm talking about marketing goals. I would set a separate set of goals for your business from a marketing perspective. And they should obviously tie into your larger business goals, but this is a roadmap for how you're going to get there. So this could relate to social media following, e-newsletter building, website metrics, anything that you think feeds into that end goal that you have for your business. You want to identify that marketing goal or goals at the beginning of the year and track those just as you would those really strong business goals. Now, the second one here is do your research. A lot of people, I think, will start a business or get into business and just think, all right, I need as much exposure as possible, so I'm just going to throw, spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. I would encourage you, before you start any kind of marketing, that you do some research on your audience and also your competitors, in addition to your own content. And we'll talk about content in a little while. You want to take a strategic approach to marketing, and starting with research is really the best way to do that. I'll give you an example of how we've used that this past year at Visit Franklin. We hired a company called Destination Analysts to do some research on our own audience. And that's where I would suggest you start, is with your own audience. And what I mean by that is people who are your customers, who are either following you on social media or they've signed up for your newsletter. They are familiar with you in some way. And just poll them. You don't have to have a fancy research company come and do this for you. There are great free or low cost survey tools out there, like SurveyMonkey is one I would suggest, where you can poll your audience and get some information from them about what they want to hear from you. You can get a lot of audience insights from Google Analytics, which I'll talk about in a little while, and also from going on the back end and taking a look at your followers on social media. So that way you know who you're talking to. You want to know the demographics. So who is that target audience? Who is that person that is your customer? And imagine them standing in front of you. For Visit Franklin, for example, we've seen that our top target market is women, and it's between ages of 35 and 65. So that's a pretty strong range. But whenever we're creating content and working on marketing plans, we're thinking, okay, where is that 35 to 65-year-old woman searching for information? And also, what is it that she's interested in seeing from us? What's going to be interesting to her? So instead of thinking of your audience as a wide crowd, it helps sometimes to narrow it down, and you can do that through research. Going back to the Destination Analyst research that I mentioned earlier, we polled our social media crowd, our e-newsletter crowd, and we got a ton of great information that has informed our marketing strategy probably for the next 3 years. We were able to find out what people are interested in doing when they're in Franklin, what they want to see more of, what they want to hear more of from us. We got some great demographics on them, who they're traveling with, where they're staying. And so we have used that as the basis for everything we're doing over the next couple of years. You can do a much smaller approach to that, again, on your own, where you survey your own audience and use some free tools to look into that. But I would definitely start with that research piece. And in addition to that, you want to identify where your audience is listening. So I think a lot of small businesses can go two ways. The first thing that they can do is throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. They end up wasting a lot of money that way. But I also think that some people put their eggs all in one basket. So you say, you know what, I'm going to go all in on social media advertising. And which is, social media advertising is a wonderful thing to do, and I'd encourage you to do that. But the customer journey is very diverse. So you want to make sure that you're reaching them in a lot of different places. You want to diversify your strategy and not just put all your eggs in one basket. So take a look at that target demographic and figure out, where are they absorbing information? Where are they searching online? What websites are they visiting? What's interesting to them? And make sure that you're in front of them in those places. Make sure you meet them where they are, and not just where you think they're going to be. You also want to choose a vehicle with strong data and return on investment. TV and radio, in a lot of ways from a marketing perspective, is, I don't want to say dead, but it definitely is dying in a sense, because of, first of all, the expense, and also the lack of trackability. There's so many wonderful digital platforms now that give you some really robust data and insight. So Visit Franklin, for example, we have moved solely to digital. We have a couple of print options that we do from a marketing perspective, but just with the trackability of digital, we've gone, I'd say 95% digital. And as a small business, I would encourage you to look at doing the same. That's going to be a really great return on investment for your money. So next, I want to talk about your website. You want to make sure that you're investing in your website. The first thing that you can do here is a website audit. Sounds complicated, but it's not really. It's honestly just taking a look at your website and figuring out, what is that one thing that you want someone to do when they're on your site, and are you pointing them to that on, almost every single page of your site? So, for example, do you want them to purchase something? Do you want them to sign up for a newsletter? Are you trying to gain new customers in some way? You want to make sure that whatever form that is that you want them to fill out, whatever page you want them to visit, if it's just informational, that everything you do on that site is cleanly pointing to that, and they're able to access that. Website is a living, breathing thing, so you want to make sure that you're paying attention to it on a regular basis. You can take a look at your competitors and see what they're doing on their websites. That's a great way to do an audit, and that might inform you as far as some additional ideas what you can do for yours. SEO is a scary word, search engine optimization. A lot of people think, I don't want to touch SEO. I don't know how to do it. It's very confusing. There are a lot of great free tools and free information out there that can help you with SEO. I have put a link down here to free information about Google Analytics. I would first of all encourage you, if you have a website, which I assume most of you do, to use Google Analytics. It's a free tool that can easily be added with a short code snippet that's placed on the back of your website. It's actually very easy to do, and it'll give you a ton of insight about who's visiting your website and what they're doing while they're there. And you can find a lot of free resources online about SEO as well, and keywords on your website, and how that'll make you show up a little bit higher in search. If you want to go further with SEO, you can always hire a contractor, consultant, or an agency to help you build out that SEO. But that's something to pay attention to. And then just generally your digital footprint. Whenever you're doing a website audit, not only looking at your website, but just does everything about your business online represent you accurately? So you want to make sure that the language on your social media channels, on Yelp, on your website, wherever you can be found, that it's representative of your business. And if it's not, there are a lot of ways that you can go in and change that as well. Something that I forgot to mention actually back on the research page that relates to this is branding. That's a big one that I left out. I apologize. But before you get started on any kind of content or marketing campaign, you want to make sure that not only you, but everyone in your company has a strong sense of your brand. You can do this through a brand audit where you bring everyone together in your company, and then also do some research with your stakeholders and customers to really find out who they perceive you to be. You can pull in a graphic designer to be able to solidify that look for yourself, but you want to make sure that you have a strong, authentic sense of your brand and who you are and what you offer. And it helps a lot of times to put that into a branding guide or some kind of a document where everyone on your team or your company can view it. You can share that with any contractors or agencies that you work with on a regular basis for consistency's sake. But that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you have a consistent brand presence across your website, your social, anywhere that you might be, that it's an authentic brand. So e-newsletter campaign tips is the next piece that I want to cover here. I know many of you probably have an e-newsletter, and I'm a big e-newsletter fan, as Oprah is, obviously. You don't want to just go willy-nilly with the e-newsletter campaign. I think a lot of people think, okay, this is great. I have, plenty of people on my e-newsletter list. I've got a ton of information that I want to share. I'm just going to put it all out there. Make sure you approach this with strategy, because if you don't do it right out of the gate, people are going to immediately unsubscribe. So you want to make sure that you are providing value to customers with your e-newsletters. So what are you sharing with them? Are you sharing discounts? Are you sharing specials? Are you sharing some kind of information that no one else, your typical customer that doesn't sign up for the e-newsletter isn't getting? So what value are you offering to them first? That's what you want to think about with content. You want the content to be short and engaging. No one wants to read a 3-page e-newsletter, so you want to keep it quick. I mean, think about all the e-newsletters that you get in your inbox. How many of those do you pay attention to? Usually it's the ones with a great headline, subject line, so make sure that you're paying attention to your subject lines as well. And then identify a frequency that works for you. We have several e-newsletters with several different frequencies, but figure out how often you think your audience needs or wants to hear from you. And sometimes that can be based on the engagement that you're seeing with your newsletters. Some people do it quarterly, some people do it weekly, bi-weekly, whatever makes sense for you from a workload standpoint, whatever you think you can handle and what your audience is interested in. But I would identify that frequency and make sure that you stick with that. And then also customize your email when possible. This is a hard thing to do as a small business, but if you can get it right from the start, I think it'll go a long way. And what I mean by that is whenever you are asking people to sign up for your e-newsletter, you can have them check certain preferences and interests. So what is it that they want to hear from you, and what does their background look like, in a way that you can customize that information. You can basically separate your e-newsletter into different lists. And you can serve them information that is specifically targeted or interesting to them. And that's certainly a way that can raise that engagement number for you. The next thing I want to, and also on e-newsletters, I want to say don't ever purchase a list. I know that a lot of small businesses, you want to build your list quickly, and it's very tempting to buy a list, but you want to make sure that your audience is authentic and people that are actually wanting to follow you. There's a lot of laws surrounding e-newsletters and opt-ins, and you want to make sure that people are opting into your newsletter before you're sending them information. There's some legalities built in there. So you never want to buy a list. Make sure that you're coming about that list honestly, I would say, or with an authentic audience. The next thing I want to cover here is to not forget the power of PR. I started my career in PR and, pitched media for 10 years. That was my main focus, was finding newsworthy stories for my clients. And I have, Matt on my team does PR now, and he does a fantastic job. And I've moved a little bit away from the PR part. So it's always nice for me to come back to it and talk about the PR side of things, because it is so very important. And I've seen how it can work for many businesses over the years. So the first thing you want to do is just don't forget about media strategy and the power of PR and planning throughout the year. So what I mean by that is sit down and think about all of the offerings that you might have coming out this next year for your business. What is something that is newsworthy throughout the year? You might have 2 or 3 things, but put those on the calendar and back up from there from a pitching perspective, and make sure that you're prepared with the right information at the right time to the right journalist to pitch those stories about your business. There's no greater coverage that you can get from your business than some free PR. And there's some easy ways to do that. The biggest thing that you can do is to start building relationships with media partners. So anyone that might cover your business from a local perspective or even a regional perspective, reporters are always open to sit down and go to get coffee or lunch. And the best way that you can build a relationship with them is to not, ask something of them all the time, in my opinion, but to serve as a friendly resource for them for any information that they might need as relevant to your industry. So they might not necessarily be doing a story on your business, but they're doing something about that particular industry. And if you can serve as the thought leader there, that will really set your business apart and get you some extra coverage. And then whenever it does come time for you to pitch that story about your business to them, they have you top of mind, and they're typically going to be interested in doing something if it's newsworthy. A tough thing to do is to identify newsworthy stories about your business It's easy to think that obviously everything you're doing as a business is wonderful, but not everything is newsworthy. So it takes some time to really kind of hone that skill and understand what the media is interested in hearing about. One of the best ways you can do that is follow those reporters that would cover your business and see what they're writing about, figure out what's relevant to the larger media landscape at the time. What are people covering in the news in general, and match your story to that. That typically works wonders for small business. And everyone loves a good small business story. So hopefully most of you can have some success in this area. And then I also want to mention influencer strategy under the power of PR. Influencers have become a very important part of digital marketing and PR over the past, 7 to 8 years, I would say, is probably when it's really grown. I think that it's a great strategy to partner with influencers when you can. This is a pay-for-play situation, so you want to make sure that you have a contract in place with the influencer and that it's a very clear agreement between you and the influencer, that you've said, okay, I want you to cover these 3 things, and it'll be for 3 posts over 2 weeks and then 2 reshares on social media. So you want to make sure you just have a very clear contract laid out with that influencer. And then the other tip I would give there is to partner with influencers that either have a journalism background or are based in a blog, because you're going to get more exposure that way. There are a lot of Instagram models out there who have fake following, and a lot of people fall for those big numbers thinking that that is the right exposure and audience for them. But the true exposure that you want is an audience that matches your audience. So you don't always need to go for those large influencer numbers, but make sure that the audience is an authentic audience and one that matches yours, and that the influencer is based in a blog or has some kind of journalism background. That typically will help you go further with your influencer relationships. So next we're going to get into social media. Everyone talks about creating compelling content that everybody loves, and the office is here to tell you about it. So I love a good meme, if you can't tell. So going into social media here, I have a few tips that I want to cover. First of all, social media can be very overwhelming for small businesses because not only is it a full-time job, it is a multiple person job. I don't think that whenever people first get into small business that they often, recognize that social media, they don't understand how much time it's going to take. So I would say the first thing that you can do is to narrow down your options and choose 2 platforms. If you feel overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, we encourage people to choose 2 platforms and start there. Typically it's Facebook and Instagram, but if there are other platforms that work for your business, then you can go for those as well. I have mentioned on here, as a former agency person, it's hard for me to say this, but let me explain myself when I say bring it in-house. What I mean by that is make sure that you are either running social media within your small business, or you have a point person on your team that is working closely with an agency on the social media piece. The reason I say this is because it is such a wonderful branding opportunity on social. But if you are to farm that out to someone who isn't intimately familiar with your brand, it's very obvious. If you have a disconnected agency or a contractor who isn't incredibly familiar with your business, or who isn't in-house, is running your social, and they don't understand the ins and outs of your brand, it can seem disconnected. So I would encourage you, if you have the option to have someone on staff run your social who truly understands your brand, I would do that. Or the other option, if you hire an agency, make sure you have a contact within your business who can work closely with that agency to approve posts, or give them some guidance and help them truly understand your brand. Hopefully you've put together a branding guideline book that the agency can follow, but that helps sometimes. Be consistent is the top one I have up here. So you're going to choose your 2 platforms and then be consistent. So figure out how often you're going to post. What does the frequency look like? That's the first thing. The worst thing that you can do is to get on social media and then post very infrequently. or not at all. So you want to make sure if you commit to social media that you are fully committing. It's not something you can just put a half foot in. People really see social media as a living, breathing version of a website. So they're going to go to your Facebook page or your Instagram page to look for the most up-to-date information. They expect for that information to be on your website, but people are not just looking at websites these days. In order for them to feel like a business is valid in a lot of ways, they're looking to see them on social media, and they're looking to see those updated platforms where they can get the most information. One way that you can be consistent with your content and also manage it in-house is to use some free tools and tutorials. A couple that I would suggest are Buffer and Sprout. Those are two really wonderful social media management and scheduling tools. You can schedule posts out for months at a time. You can monitor comments and likes and messages from those platforms as well, because one of the biggest things that you want to make sure you're doing, in addition to being consistent, choosing these platforms, branding, et cetera, is making sure that you're responsive. It is really important to make sure that you're responding to your customers whenever they're reaching out to you on social media. You don't have to do that on a daily basis if you don't have time, even if it's just once a week. If you take time once a week to sit down and answer all of those direct messages or respond to those comments, that's a really good place to start. I mentioned on here, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I mentioned on here a social media audit. I mentioned a website audit earlier and a branding audit. It's always a good thing to just step back and do these audits yourself. So take a look at your social channel, go on the back end and figure out which posts are getting the most engagement. And I usually put that into buckets and topics. And then this is a very easy thing to do. You can kind of divide it up and say, okay, I've gotten the most engagement on these type of posts, and continue to create content that falls within those buckets. And that typically works pretty well. I'd also encourage you to look at your competitors. That's a great way to gauge what they're doing, and it sparks some ideas for your own business. You can look at businesses that in your industry but are much larger and see what they're doing on social media. But it never hurts we keep a very close eye on our competitors on other destinations. I look at Savannah a lot and Charleston. I really like to see what they're doing. And it sparks ideas that, for our team sometimes too, whenever we're looking at that social. So don't hesitate to do that. You want to be authentic to your brand on social. I mentioned this earlier with Bring It In-House. That's just such an important thing to do, is to make sure that you're being authentic on those platforms, and that it feels connected to your audience. And then I already mentioned here timely responses. This last bullet here, you can take advantage of free tools and tutorials. Instagram for Business is a good example. I'm going to talk about some social media advertising in a minute. So Facebook for Business is also a great tool. I know I've mentioned free tools over and over and over again, but as a small business, there's so many resources for free at your fingertips. All it takes is really the time. And I know that that's a very hard part of it, but just carving out the time to be able to teach yourself a few things about social will go a long way. I'm sure I'll have some questions here at the end about social that I'll get to in just a little bit. Social media advertising, I want to cover that as well. I want to talk about organic versus paid social media. Unfortunately, these days, it is very hard to get any kind of reach or engagement from an organic standpoint. And what I mean by that is just posting something on your Facebook or Instagram page without putting money behind it. It's very hard to see any kind of engagement or building of a following with just organic posting. The way that Facebook has created their algorithm, has set everything up, you have to put some money behind it to be able to see any kind of return on investment, unfortunately. The best return on investment, we would say, from social media advertising is Facebook ads. There are so many different ways that you can target on Facebook. You can serve very targeted information to a very targeted audience, which is perfect. That's just what you want as a savvy marketer. So I would go with Facebook ads first. You can try out Twitter and Instagram ads and see how that works for your business. Those are great as well. But the best ROI that I've seen from my experience, small businesses all the way up to national corporations, is Facebook ads. It's just been consistent over so many years. You can use Facebook as a bit for business as a resource as well. It's another one of those free resources. And then whenever you're putting some money behind advertising, and again, whenever you go to Facebook ads, it's a very easy process. We'll walk you through the back end. It's not expensive either. I mean, I would encourage you to start out with a couple $100s, set your time for your ad for a week or two, throw $200, $250 behind it and see how it does. That's the great thing about social media advertising is you can continue to test it, see how that works, and then pivot if it's not working for you. But try your best not to focus on what we call vanity metrics. So vanity metrics are likes and follows. I know that you want to build your page, you want to build that following, and that obviously is an important piece of things, but that should not be your main focus. I would focus more on shares, click-throughs, engagement, because that shows you that people are really invested in the content that you're serving. And they're invested in taking that next step, which is hopefully making a purchase or coming on board as a new client. So try not to focus on those vanity metrics as much as you focus on that engagement and sharing. But if you are on social media, using social media advertising, that following will naturally increase and incline as you're doing that paid work. So on social media, I want to talk about the best ways to incorporate user-generated content. So if you're not familiar with UGC, what that means, that is any content that your followers are creating and putting on their platforms that tags your business or talks about your business in some way. This is a really important part and has become an important part of social media over the past few years. You want to make sure that you pay attention to it. So the best way to do that is to incorporate that not only on social, but you can do that on your website too. We have a tool that we use called CrowdRiff. They work a lot in the tourism industry, but they work with other businesses as well. And they create these beautiful galleries of user-generated content that you can place on your website so that people can see the experience of your business through other customers' eyes. The second, I would say rivaling the PR coverage, the user-generated content coverage that your business gets, I would say is probably, at the top along with PR because it's free publicity in a way. So you don't want to ignore it. And if people are enjoying your product or enjoying your service or whatever it is that your business is offering and they're sharing that with their friends on social media, I mean, what better gift can you be given as a small business? So you want to make sure that you are sharing that information on your social channels. The biggest thing you want to make sure you're doing is that you're getting rights to share that content. And you can do that by simply sending them a direct message and saying, hey, is it okay if I share this on my page? And then you want to give them photo credit as well. You don't ever want to share content without giving someone photo credit. But the way that you can track that content is through hashtag searches. If you encourage people to use certain hashtags when they're talking about your business, that's great. People use hashtag FranklinTN whenever they're visiting Franklin, so that's an easy way for us to search and find their content. But you can also just search other keywords within social media, and typically you'll find something related to your business, or they'll tag you as well. So moving on, I'm checking the time. I think I'm okay. I want to talk about messaging during a pandemic in particular. This is my last slide here, so we'll run through this and then I'll take any questions. So as many of you have done over the past several months, this has been just a very confusing time for businesses, especially small businesses. We at Visit Franklin, we rely on the beauty of small businesses to bring visitors into town. We are so invested in making sure that our small businesses are healthy and are thriving throughout this time. And so we, understand the challenges that you all are facing as it relates to COVID-19 right now. My heart goes out to all of you because I know that it's just affected you in so many awful ways. But hopefully we will crawl out of this hole in the next year and be on to better times. But I wanted to mention a few points that we have noticed from a marketing perspective as you're messaging during a pandemic. So the biggest thing whenever you're creating a marketing plan for this next year is to be nimble and plan by hypothetical scenarios. So you want to have a plan A, B, and C. As you've seen over the past 5 months, you'll start running a certain direction and you think that that's going to be your plan for the foreseeable future, and the cases spike and you realize, okay, I'm back to, square one again. We have started planning we've kind of set some metrics in place as it relates to case counts and website interaction and readiness of other destinations to travel. So you could look at setting some metrics of your own for your own business to figure out, how you plan for your marketing for the year. The next two seem pretty simple, but I think it can be forgotten when you're kind of in that business mindset. You want to make sure that you're being human and reading the room. So what I mean by that is making sure that you are serving content that speaks to people where they are in the moment. The last thing that you want to do is to be tone deaf to the situation and try to sell somebody on a product or a service when they are going through the hardest time in their life, or they're just not ready for that content. So what I mean by read the room is make sure that you understand the environment and the nuances that we're in right now, and make sure that you are providing information and content that is inspirational and also invitational at the same time. But just be conscious of trying to strongly sell someone during this time. You don't want to turn people off or come across tone deaf during this time. And then be really upfront and honest with your messaging and acknowledge this unique time. Talk specifically about health and safety. What are you doing as a business to be safe and healthy if you are a storefront, or if you are taking clients at this time, if you're in the services business? Make sure that they understand through your website, through your social media, anywhere that you have a presence, that they are seeing what you're doing from a safety perspective, because that's what people are looking at first right now. They're going on your website and they're looking to see if you've provided information about COVID-19 and what you and your staff are doing to keep them safe and healthy. And I mentioned here using visual cues. I think that's helpful. If you can use icons to talk about mask wearing or social distancing, that often helps people to recognize. It's just easier for them to recognize right off the bat. And then also, I know that many of you have done this already, but look for ways to pivot your business during this time. So if you have never had offered any kind of virtual services, you're probably already doing that, but now is the time. Now is the time to possibly think about that moving forward into the years to come. It's not just something that you need to do during the pandemic, but if you've seen some success from that, figure out how to work that into your business moving forward, as well as things like curbside service, etc. You just want to make sure that you're meeting the customer where they are, and not just, saying, well, this is how my business is run and how it's always run, and I guess I'm just going to take a hit right now. It's been so inspiring to see. I've not seen one business in Williamson County do that, honestly, since we started this pandemic. I've seen absolutely nothing but people that have pulled themselves up from their bootstraps and said, okay, I've never done this before, but I'm going to start an online store. I'm going to start curbside service. And I'm going to start virtual services. I'm going to start taking patients or clients online. So that's been really inspiring, and I would encourage you to figure out how to continue to do that moving forward. So that is all that I have here for you today. I do want to leave you, I'll take some questions I see in the chat box in just one second, but I want to leave you with two very quick points. Create a goal for yourself to carve out dedicated time to marketing. That's very simple, but even if it's one Friday a month, set aside that time on your calendar, take a look at these things, and set some smaller goals for yourself. Just carve out that time, because if you don't do it, it gets away from you quickly. Then it starts to get overwhelming and it just snowballs down the hill. So if you can carve out some dedicated time, I think that will really help. And then if I haven't talked about it enough, I would encourage you to take use of these great free online tools and resources. You don't have to have an abundance of marketing budget to be able to do these things. There's some really simple free online tools that can help you. And I'll mention too, Courtney on my team, she oversees all of our digital aspects and social media. I have her here on the call in case there are certain questions that you all would like to ask her in particular as well. But she's putting together a social media guide for our hospitality partners and small businesses. So I'd be happy to share that with the chamber once that's ready, and they can send that out to you. And that will have a list of a lot of those free tools and resources so that you have a leave behind after this presentation. That should be ready very soon, and I'll make sure that you all receive that, and hopefully that'll serve as a bit of a guidebook for you all as you're looking at your marketing plans over this next year. So thank you so much for having me. I have a couple of questions here in the chat box that I'm going to take, and feel free if there are others that you think of. I believe I have a few minutes here to take some questions, so I'll start off with these two, and then feel free to add if you had any. So the first one I have is from Keith Rathbun, and he says, would you adjust any of these recommendations if you were a professional services company doing business-to-business marketing versus business-to-consumer? That's a wonderful question. Honestly, no. I was thinking of this presentation with both, truly, thinking of folks that are in the professional services industry versus business to consumer. There's going to be some slight changes here and there in the recommendations, but the bulk of this, the basics, apply to business as well. When you're talking about your digital presence, your website, your branding, your end consumer is going to be different. It's going to be another business, obviously, but you can continue to do those research and those audits in the same exact way. Things like PR might be a little bit different, and influencer strategy, that might be a bit different in the B2B marketing. You might be looking more at trade publications versus, other types of beat reporters. But that piece of it might change, and influencers as well would probably change in that space, because that's the B2B influencer is going to look a bit different than the B2C consumer. So the biggest change I would say there would be on the PR side, but the majority of the rest of this would be the same. Social media, I still think, is important on the B2B side. Make sure that you're just serving the right content to the right people, whether that's the consumer or ultimately the end business. These are also, as I mentioned before, very kind of general marketing tips. So it never hurts if you want some additional counsel to sit down with an agency or a consultant and get some kind of customized tips for your business. And that's something that you could then take and run with yourself. It's never a bad investment to get an outsider to take a look at your business and just give you some tips. And then I have one other question that says, are there local influencers or accounts I should be following, tagging, or hashtagging when I post on social? And that is a great question. It's hard to answer that not knowing your business. So it really depends on your business in particular. So for example, if you are, let's say you're a boutique in downtown Franklin and you're selling women's high-end women's clothing. There are definitely local fashion influencers that you want to be following, tagging in certain posts. And then you can look at that particular follower and see the hashtags that they are creating and make sure that you are using those as well. I'm sorry, I'm kind of giving a vague answer there, but it just kind of depends on what your business is. And then there will be a host of influencers typically related to that business in particular. And you can find a lot of that through search on social as well. So I don't see any other questions in the chat box. If anybody has any additional questions after this presentation, feel free to email me. It's lauren@visitfranklin.com, and I'd be happy to answer those. But thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning. It was great speaking to you all.
Thank you, Lauren, for being here, and just, such timely information I think that you brought forth. And just a couple points that I wanted to point out is, just be human and read the room. I think that's so important right now, just in terms of, obviously we're all looking to grow our business and gain more business, but just being really conscious of what's going on right now. I've said it many times that, none of us are presenting our best self right now. We're all coping in some sort of a way. So just be conscious of that, especially when you're marketing to people and you're trying to, generate business, just being conscious of what people are doing. And then the other thing I thought was great was just, creating dedicated time. I think it's really easy to get busy with the day-to-day, and even you might be busy with work. And, some of us you got client after client or, business after business that's happening, but don't let that get in the way of what's happening in the future and the need to make sure that you have some dedicated time to continue that pipeline for whatever it is, new clients, new business, and all of that. So Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for being a resource. Feel free, those of you that are watching this, to reach out to Lauren. She's a fantastic resource for us here in Williamson County, and we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you all for attending. Make sure that you join us next month for First Friday. We've got another great month planned for you next month, and we look forward to connecting with all of you. Also, check our events calendar at williamsonchamber.com. Make sure that you stay up to date on some of the things that are happening throughout the month of August. We've got our Women's Leadership Conference at the end of the month. We have Member Connects. We've got lots of opportunities for you to get connected virtually and even in person. We've got ribbon cuttings and a few things like that we get to see each other's faces covered in masks, but it's an opportunity to connect. So thank you all for this morning, and appreciate your time, and take care. Bye.